Good morning on this Sunday, July 24th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. A U.S. appeals court allows Georgia's restrictive abortion law to take effect immediately. Also, the Fulton County judge in former President Trump's election investigation rules the fake GOP electors must answer to their subpoenas. And with all of the focus on fighting crime in Atlanta, the homicide rate is still on the rise for the third year in a row. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Janelle are all here. We're all back from vacation. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
It came as no surprise to supporters and opponents of Georgia's new abortion law. A U.S. appeals court in Georgia ruled there is no constitutional right to abortion, based on the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling allowing Georgia's heartbeat law to take effect immediately. Women can no longer legally get an abortion once a heartbeat is detected. There are exceptions for rape and incest as long as a police report is filed. Melita, we'll start with you this week. As I mentioned, I don't think anyone was surprised by the ruling.
True, nobody was surprised, but what was surprising was the fact that there was not the 28-day period typical for such cases before the law took effect. So this law took effect immediately during the middle of a business day. The other thing that was surprising is that the court used the term abortionist multiple times, like 16 times. In their opinion, and that's not the way such opinions are typically drafted. They usually refer to the people as appellates or plaintiffs. So the harsh use of that word for some of these some of the people who'd filed the cases don't even provide medical care. So that was a very telling indication of where the mood of the court is, and it's left medical providers all over the state who provide obstetrics and gynecological care in a real quandary as to how the law will affect care provided to women who have troubled pregnancies.
This is such an important issue, so I want to run the table on this, Phil.
Well, I think that it bears repeating that this goes back to all 50 state legislatures like Georgia. And so we're not banning abortion in America. I'm glad you pointed out, Lori, that there are exceptions for rape and incest, especially if you file a police report. Politically, I would say that inflation, grocery prices, gasoline prices, if you're going to look at the impact of this, are going to far outweigh what's happening right now.
Theron.
I think the one thing we got to sort of, as Democrats, shift to now, it becomes a policy discussion. I agree that we were not surprised that the appeals court was going to put, I don't want to call it a heartbeat bill because many experts have corrected me. You cannot detect a heartbeat at 6 weeks. And so it really is an abortion ban. And so this abortion ban legislation has now gone into effect. And so now we got to have a conversation about the policy that can be put in place. We all know that the November election is so important because we need to elect more pro-choice Democrats. And I think that there's an opportunity here for some bipartisan common sense solutions to come together to figure out how do we tackle the issue that 600,000 women right now in the state of Georgia live in counties that have no access to contraception. Let's also talk about how 1 in 7 children that are born in Georgia who are eligible for this assistance, we need to expand subsidies. And so these are the type of things that I think when you want to be a pro-life state, let's talk about the pro-life that is in existence right now and how Georgia can improve to particularly around reproductive rights.
Janelle.
Yeah, you know, I want to make sure we highlight the 6-week thing because I know that's been a talking point that the Democrats use is that, you know, either at 6 weeks you don't know you're pregnant, now we're saying there's no heartbeat. But here's the thing, right? So chemical abortion or the abortion pill is utilized up to 11 weeks. Majority of the people who utilize the pill take the pill around the 6-week mark. So that debunks the whole idea that women don't know that they are pregnant at 6 weeks, especially provided that 54% of abortions are chemical abortions and not surgical abortions. But I think we need to talk about a lot of things. Like I know you mentioned some stats as well, but I think that it's also important to note that 40% of women who have abortions say that they didn't want to have an abortion, but they felt the pressure from people telling them that they can't afford their child or that they won't be able to take care of their child. So I think while I do think the discussion has to shift, I know it's shifting the policy for the Democrats, for Republicans, I think we need to shift to wraparound services and how we're going to support these women.
Well, let's talk about the effect of this issue on the governor's race. At a news conference Wednesday, Stacey Abrams vowed to put this issue front and center, making a plea to moderate voters. Darren, back to you. She has to do something to get the momentum on her side. Is this the right move to appeal to more moderate voters, or are the economic issues, as Phil mentioned, still more important to them?
Well, I think she can do both, but we're not shocked that as a woman running for governor, she can sort of make sure that she talks about this from a woman's point of view. I think that's the thing that Janelle, I agree on, that more women need to be paid more close attention to, because it's affecting all women, not just black women, Hispanic women, Asian women, or white women. But what she's doing, Lori, which I think is very strategic, she knew that this decision was going to come out. So she's really striking this contrast with what she believes should happen in the state of Georgia versus what the governor does. But no, she's got $20 million to amplify that message. But also I think she can talk about how women's rights are on the ballot, but more importantly, we need to strengthen the economy.
Phil, governor's race.
Well, I think Stacey Abrams has a huge problem, and Melita and I were debating this a few weeks ago, and Stacey Abrams at one point said she was in favor of abortion right up to birth. Then she started using weasel words. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm not for that. But she's way beyond. She wants to codify Roe, just like Warnock does, Senator Warnock. That's very radical. When you go right up to abortion to the date of birth, the Democrats are going to be hurt, whether it's with moderate, independent, suburban women or with anybody. And so again, I have to repeat, this is just one issue of many important issues, and with Biden being so unpopular in the state of Georgia, he's dropping even more. The Democrats have a millstone around their necks, and they're going to have to be talking about how kitchen table issues.
But no doubt, Melita, abortion will be a big issue heading into November.
Abortion will be a really big issue, and Phil mischaracterizes the up until birth stance. The codification of Roe it was not that, and that is not Stacey Abrams' position, nor is it Warnock's position. But the reality is that Georgia women basically now have about 2 weeks to seek abortion care, and truly a lot of women don't know that they are pregnant. And miscarriages will become police investigations. Women and girls are going to die waiting on care. And then the other thing is this whole idea of, oh, there are exceptions for rape and incest, but you have to file a police report. A lot of people don't file police reports, but if you have teenage girls getting pregnant and all of a sudden the boyfriend is accused of rape so the girl can get an abortion, there are going to be a lot of upset parents. Because if a police report is required, then you may have, you'll have some very interesting dynamics work out.
Okay, I want to switch gears because I want to continue on to the governor's race on a different issue. Our friend Greg Bluestein over at the AJC really had an interesting article on how Governor Kemp is faring with minority voters and doing better than expected, especially among Hispanic voters. Theron, I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm sure Janelle's got something to say about that as well, so I'll try to be brief.
She's coming next.
No, I'm saying now.
Thank you.
I think the thing is that, look, we know that there was a different sort of Brian Kemp when he was campaigning, and then immediately when he was elected governor, he tried to do his best to really empower a lot of minorities, particularly in the judicial space, right? So you got to give him credit for that. And so I think it's a wake-up call for Democrats, and Blue points this out, is that while we know that we have historically received 90+% of the African-American vote, we've received the majority of the Hispanic vote, we've got some work to do. But I'm not panicking just yet, because I think that when it comes down to policy, and how we amplify that policy, how it benefits black and brown communities, and how we've been on the forefront for decades, I think ultimately a lot of those voters will vote Democrat.
Janelle, I want to ask you, Bluestein cited numbers from the Kemp campaign's internal polling, so these aren't official poll numbers, right? But the poll did find about a quarter of young African-American voters back Kemp.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
I do, 100%. And you know, I saw another poll that showed that he was actually faring better than Herschel Walker when it comes to black voters. And the reason why is because Governor Kemp has focused on going directly to issues that plague the community. He's went around the gatekeepers and, you know, the race hustlers and said, you know what, I'm going to talk specifically about issues like being able to protect your family, being able to put food on the table, being able to do things that are going to promote upward mobility. And that's the conversation that's being had in black communities. And so I'm not surprised at all.
Melita, were you surprised by this, or do you believe it?
Well, I'm not certain I believe all of those numbers, but I also believe that what we haven't polled yet are how many formerly Republican women are going to use abortion as an issue to shift their votes to Stacey Abrams rather than Brian Kemp. How many independent voters are going to switch their votes to Abrams over Kemp. And so that polling, I think, gives Abrams a lot of room to pick up the votes she needs to win.
All right, we'll leave it there, folks. Thank you. Coming up, 16 Georgia Republicans who were so-called fake electors could be prosecuted for their actions. We'll discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
16 Georgia Republicans who claimed former President Donald Trump won the state's election and claimed to be Georgia electors could face criminal charges. Now, most of them filed a motion to quash their subpoenas, but Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney ruled the fake electors could not be excused from testifying. There's a lot to digest here. Phil, I'll start with you.
Well, as I've said before, I think the special grand jury overseen by District Attorney Fani Willis has gotten way out of control. I think there should have been an investigation, but now it's gone from justice to just basically politics. And let's remember that there was an ongoing Trump-sponsored lawsuit questioning the results of the Georgia presidential election. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, rightly or wrongly, that can be done. So to have these alternate electors picked on December 14th, which was the proper day, by the Republicans, it was part of a legal strategy. And so it's not just that they just did this to try to overturn an election. I think that has to be remembered. And what's going to happen is they're all going to take the Fifth Amendment. This will be very brief testimony.
Darren?
So if you look at this, Lori, all right, from a Democratic standpoint, we're like, look, we did our electoral process very open. We were not, and these are some allegations that were made. People were hiding in rooms. People were sort of covering up things. And so I think that's the contrast. So if you look at this, these are very serious allegations, and they should be taken seriously. And I don't think that this is a show investigation. I think Fani Willis is doing exactly what the people elected her to do. But Republicans are saying that there was no criminal act actually done. I actually kind of say that, not that I agree or disagree with it, but I'm the same person that didn't believe that changing test scores for Atlanta public school teachers was a crime either, until it went through a process in Fulton County. And this is the same DA who sent teachers to jail. And so I think there's a striking similarity about what was the intent of what you were doing when you became a fake elector. And with this grand jury, they're going to have to answer those questions whether they plead the Fifth.
You can't get into the minds of these people. That's very difficult.
I'm just giving you some factual data that I think that it's an investigation that should be had. A lot of Democrats and Republicans question, was there a criminal act done? But I'm telling you that I believe that the prosecutors I've talked to, that when you have these type of jurors and you send these target letters, which the DA has done, and you have to basically answer the subpoena, there may be some stuff uncovered.
I want to talk about some of the politics behind some of this. Judge McBurney also heard arguments on a motion filed by State Senator Burt Jones, who is the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor, alleging that the investigation is politically motivated because Willis is an active supporter of his Democratic opponent. He's trying to get her disqualified from the case. Janelle.
Yeah, I think that was what I was going to bring up too, is that, there's something that Fani Willis has to watch out for, and that's bias, right? Because it's starting to look a little biased when you're throwing fundraisers and hosting it, especially for an individual that's running against someone who you are sending in a subpoena to. That's the problem. And so I do think that it's all convoluted into distraction. To Theron's point, that I think that's something we have to watch out for, right? So make sure they don't create a case around intention. But to Phil's point, how do you go into the minds of people and say, hey, this is what I know your intention was? How do you prove that? So all of it to me is a huge distraction, and I'm watching it, and I really want it to be over as it gets closer to November, because it's going to just take all the air out of the room.
Melita?
The fundraiser in question was during the primary. Fani Willis was supporting Charlie Bailey, with whom she had worked in the prosecutor's office. Nobody knew that Burt Jones would necessarily win the lieutenant governor's race. So that's part of it. Now, Judge McBurney did have some concerns, and he said some things during that hearing. But so long as district attorneys and even judges are elected, there will always be political fundraisers on one side or the other of the ballot. Does that mean that in the future, Democratic DAs can only prosecute Democrats, or Republican DAs can only prosecute Republicans? There's a thin line about all of this, but so long as those positions are political and elected, those candidates will have to raise money.
Phil?
Well, I'm going to quote Judge McBurney, and I think he was absolutely right. He said, "What were you thinking? You know, I don't care if, who the fundraiser was for. It should not have been done when she's trying to prosecute Republicans."
She wasn't trying to prosecute
yes,
them at the time of the fundraiser.
You don't know that. You don't know that. This has been stirred up. This has been stirred up. It was in the works. And also the judge, I think, is admonishing Fani Willis and several fronts. There's been some leaks on this grand jury investigation. There should be no report at all by this grand jury. We're getting too close to the election, and so I think that the judge really shamed District Attorney Willis. I think she ought to be removed from the case, and he took it under advisement. He did not disagree with Burt Jones's attorneys. I think she might have to be removed.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I want to move on. Sounds like U.S. Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker will debate Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock, but he says as long as his team can negotiate with the Atlanta Press Club and everything goes right. Theron.
You know, I think it was Patricia Murphy who sent out a tweet from the AJC, and if you really look at Herschel's response, he didn't really commit to the debate at that moment. Now, I think later, since that has aired, there is going to be a debate, but what I saw is that a man who's saying, "Hey, I'm tough. I'm welcoming this debate," but he didn't really commit to it because he wasn't sure the terms of it. So ultimately, this is the bottom line. I'm waiting for the day. I think it's October 16th, and I'm sure you'll have. I think there are 2 more debates for us to witness a comparison and contrast, civil discussion on the issues. And I believe that our guy Raphael Warnock is going to come out on top.
Did he give himself an out, Phil?
He gave himself one out, and rightly so. I just called the Walker campaign before we were broadcasting this, and they said, "You know what? We want to debate." They throw out these 3 dates, October 16th. We want to debate. We have heard nothing, zero, zip from the Warnock campaign. They're not negotiating in good faith. What do you want, somebody to just show up on a date that's your opponent says, "Come on and we'll debate"? No. And we want to know who, as I said last week, who are going to be the questioners. The Atlanta Press Club, if they're going to do one, they ought to be getting together with both campaigns. So you don't read about this in Patricia Murphy's column. The AJC doesn't say that Warnock has done absolutely nothing to try to figure out a debate agenda.
I knew that
But
would
the
get you
Atlanta
mad.
Press Club has been doing this for a very long time.
Very long
They have the
time.
protocols in place. Melita?
That's the point I was going to make. The Atlanta Press Club has had these protocols in place for decades. That debate is one of the rites of passage if you want to serve in elected statewide office. And so for Herschel Walker to presume that he gets to negotiate the terms of a debate that's been going on for decades is ridiculous and shows his naivety.
Why should we have a bunch of liberal journalists do the whole debate format?
Last word on this for Janelle.
I want to. My message is to Walker's campaign. This is how I think he can win this debate. I really feel confident he can win it. Number one, we got to stop the negotiation conversation. Just debate. You have to debate. So do the negotiations in private. Stop making it a public thing. Secondly, I want them to message him around his core values. Stop giving him talking points. Stop trying to tell him what to say. Tell him to talk about what he believes in his core, and I think that will help him deliver it in a more sound way, and I think that will actually help him defeat Warnock on a debate stage.
All right, well, you heard it here first. I got to leave it there. Thanks, everybody. Coming up, despite all the focus on crime prevention, Atlanta's homicide rate continues to spike. We'll discuss after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
I know.
Despite all of the actions taken under Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens to curb crime, Atlanta's homicide rate is only getting worse. Investigators have looked into about 90 cases compared to 79 this time last year. Police say nearly half of these cases are gang-related. Theron, to you first, because I know you're close with the mayor. He's doing, I feel like, everything he possibly can.
Well, let's start there. He's doing everything he possibly can, right? And he's also entrusted in a new chief Shearbaum to do everything he can. So for our viewers, the homicide rate is only up 9%. Now, when I say only, I don't mean that disingenuously. We had At this time last year, 80 murders, and then this time you have 87. So that's a 9% increase. But I think the one thing that I was very happy to know is that you have seen a decrease in crime in Zone 2. That's the zone, Buckhead, that Phil likes to come in here and talk about every week, where I live, and that has gone down. You've also seen robberies go down. You've seen arrests go up. And particularly around narcotics, gangs, and guns, and robberies, you've seen that go down. And so I think that what the chief is trying to do is really do his job and reduce the amount of homicides, but he's also calling on the public to try to de-escalate conversations. Like, a lot of these homicides that we're seeing are people who are acquainted. They're over arguments, disputes. And what's happening, because we got more guns in Georgia than we've ever had on the streets, that these conflicts are resulting into people being shot and killed by using guns.
Phil, it seems like the rise in the murder rate really happened overnight, but it's going to take a lot longer to get a handle on it. You like the new police chief, you said.
I'm
said
impressed.
You have support for the mayor.
I'm impressed
Your
with the
thoughts?
new interim chief, Shearbaum, and I think that Andre Dickens is doing some good steps. Let's talk about reporting for a second. Don't get me going on that, because when there's 30 break-ins in a parking deck in Buckhead, it's only counted as one crime. They got to fix that. I intend to talk to the chief about that, Theron. But anyhow,
I'm sure he'll take your call.
He will. He will. I know it. Yeah, and also these chases. I want to see that we can chase again. If I'm watching a crime right out at the door, I can't chase. If I'm an APD person, I got to call a Georgia trooper. These are some of the things. Now, it didn't happen overnight. Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor, broke the police department of Atlanta. And I think we do have to have a little PR campaign where we have to have the mayor and the interim chief say, look, we are not Mayor Bottoms anymore in these policies. We are going to have due process for cops that are involved in shooting cases. We are going to change a lot of the things that happened under Bottoms.
Well, a crackdown on dangerous apartment complexes is perhaps one way to help solve the problem. The city of Atlanta and Fulton County are vowing to work together on this issue. DA Fonnie Willis says she's going to war against landlords who fail to address criminal activity on their property. Melita, this is a complex issue because you have so many jurisdictions involved.
It is a very complex issue, and I think they've been in silos. The regulatory and the prosecution have been in separate silos, and so to have them working together is far better. But it's a long-term problem, and I think the Atlanta newspapers are to be commended for their investigative reporting on this issue, which has made it more a matter of public awareness.
Great job. Janelle.
Yeah, again, we need Fonnie Willis to not chase Trump, but chase crime, and that's where we have to keep our focus. Because if we were doing that, then we'll see some changes, right? But to Theron's point, I do see a rise in arrests on gang members and gang violence, and I do think that's going to help. However, we got to make sure we clean up the backlog and get rid of all the frivolous chasing of Trump.
Real quickly, Phil, over to Cobb County, where the Marietta Daily Journal reports Commission Chairwoman Lisa Cupid got an earful from some East Cobb residents about the budget that adds about 150 new positions and raises the minimum wage to $17 an hour. Why all the opposition?
Well, I tell you what, when you want to raise taxes and do some of these things, you have to do budget cuts. And I think that was what was missing.
Theron, real quick.
I think at the end of the day, we got to call it what it is. This is the same area that tried to annex out of actually Cobb County, create their own city. I think the budget that the chairwoman has put forward is what's needed. She believes that that's based on the data what that particular county needs, and so ultimately I think that they have the right to oppose, but I think she'll move forward with her budget.
We'll leave it there, everyone. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
I'll go first real quickly. I want to give a huge shout out to a fellow who watches us all the time. His name is Abner Moore. He never misses a show, I'm told by his daughter Maisie. So hello to Abner. Hello from all of us here, and thank you so much for watching. I also want to mention Kathleen Kaminsky. She was an aide at the Capitol, a fixture at the Capitol, always had a smile on her face, was so positive all the time, and she died suddenly. So we're thinking of her and her family, and we keep her in our prayers. Theron, over to you.
My first winner is going to be District Attorney Fonnie Willis and also City Councilwoman Andrea Boone, who represents Southwest Atlanta. You talked about cracking down on these landlords, absentee landlords. Councilwoman Boone introduced legislation with some other council members to really crack down on a lot of these absentee landlords. And also you had in your notes, but also Forest Cove. I just want people to pay attention to this housing development. It received a lot of attention during the mayoral debates, but Andre Dickens needs help to make sure that we do everything we possibly can to help these residents who are living living in deplorable conditions in an area in Councilman Winston's district. So definitely want to make those two individuals a winner, and then also just to make sure that women continue to stay encouraged, pay attention to this new law that's gone into effect, and make sure that people understand the rights that they have to do with their body.
Janelle.
Okay, and my winner is Peter Corman, who is hosting an event. I'll be moderating with Cornell Law Professor William Jacobson. This event is going to take place on July 27th at 7 p.m. at the East Roswell Park, and we're going to be talking about how radicalizing education is tearing our country apart. That's the theme, and so we ask everyone to come out. The Eventbrite will be on my social media page.
Melita.
Well, my winners for the week are directly related to my day job because on Thursday, Georgia Win List added 22 new candidates to our list of endorsements for 2022, bringing the total to a record-setting 59. And this means that Georgia voters have a record-setting number of contested general election races this year, which gives voters a choice on who they want to represent them in the future. And in the past, Georgia's had one of the lowest rates in the country for actual contested races. My loser for the week is the person or team in Cobb County who thought slight alterations to a Nazi eagle symbol was an appropriate logo for a Cobb County elementary school right across the street from a synagogue. The neighborhood, the students, and their families deserved better from this administration.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Phil?
Well, you know, Georgia is a constitutional carry state when it comes to firearms, and Indiana just followed Georgia's law. So my winner is Elisha Dickin, who is a 22-year-old. He saw someone shooting in a mall. He quickly got out his pistol, and he probably saved dozens of lives in that mall. So I like constitutional carry.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody, and thank you so much for watching. See you again next week. Bye-bye.